I held the knife with Sophia, our fingers laced over the silver handle, and everyone counted down like it was New Year's. Flash, applause, the polite chorus of joy that weddings conjure even from strangers. She smiled for the camera the way she always does, brave, luminous, and then her eyes skimmed the room the way they had all day, hunting for something that refused to appear. The front row on her side was a neat line of empty chairs, ribbons still tied, as if her family might slip in late and claim them with an apology. No one did. I whispered something dumb about the frosting, tried to make her laugh. It landed barely. The DJ said our names like a victory announcement, and for a second I believed it. We were married. That was true and enormous. But there was a draft running through the celebration, a cold seeping under the door that flowers and champagne couldn't fix. I could feel it in the way her shoulders tightened between photos, in the way my mother kept brushing her arm like a metronome of reassurance. We pressed the first slice onto a plate. She fed me a bite. I handed up for the cheers because someone had to make it easy. When I lifted the fork to her, her phone buzzed against her hip, the soft electric insect sound of it, and she flinched like a reflex. She wasn't supposed to have it, she promised. But I knew why it was there. Hope is a stubborn thing. She glanced down, and I watched her expression shift, not a break, more like a quiet implosion. The screen glowed with a stack of red circles. 36 missed calls. Her mother. Her father. Harper. Messages piling, urgent and late. I felt a pinch in my chest, equal parts fury and protectiveness, and stepped closer so my body blocked the photographer's line of sight. "Whatever it is," I said, keeping my voice low and even, "we don't owe them this moment." She breathed in through her nose, that small, controlled inhale I'd learned meant she was calibrating. The room kept clapping. Someone shouted for a kiss. The band slid into something soft and romantic, an old standard my father loves, and the lights dimmed like a cue we hadn't asked for. "I just need a second," she said, eyes not leaving the screen. I took the plate from her, set it down, and laced our fingers again. Her hand was cool and a little sticky with icing. I kissed her temple and tasted sugar and hairspray, and the salt of a day we'd both expected to feel warmer. Then I leaned in, enough for only her to hear. "If you want to step outside, I'm with you. If you want to turn it off, I'm with you." She nodded, a tremor running through it, and slipped the phone back into the hidden seam of her dress. For a beat we stood there, married in a room that cheered for us, and I felt the shape of our life harden into something simple and true. Show up. Hold the line. Choose each other, even when the aisle is empty. I learned Ohio through Sophia's stories first, then through the careful museum her parents kept in their living room. In the photos, Harper is always centered, blonde curls lit like a halo, trophies tucked under her arm, a ribbon pinned somewhere visible. Sophia is there too, usually at the edge, a half step back, expression neat, and contained like she'd been told to behave joyfully. When she talked about it, she didn't try to make villains out of anyone. She'd just line up facts, the way an engineer would, recital over science fair, ballet shoes over calculus medal, a third-place ribbon toasted with champagne, while an acceptance letter to an advanced program got left on the counter to collect condensation rings. She told me about her mother's voice, sweet, distracted, always apologizing with a smile. About her father's calendar, how important things for Harper glowed red, while everything else faded into background gray. "You understand, right?" was the refrain Sophia grew up with, a soft-edged stamp that smoothed over missed ceremonies and empty chairs. She learned to understand. She learned to stop asking. When I visited once, early on, Evelyn served coffee in delicate cups and slid conversation toward Harper like a magnet. Harper's audition. Harper's teacher. Harper's natural gift. When I mentioned Sophia's paper, a publication in a real journal, Daniel smiled politely and said something about how math brains run in the family, then pivoted to the community theater schedule. It wasn't cruel. It was worse, the kind of blindness that thinks it's love. Sophia never called it neglect. She'd shrug and say they were busy, that Harper needed more, that there was always a rehearsal, a fitting, a showcase. But sometimes she'd press 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose and tell me about the morning of her high school graduation, the dress she ironed herself, the empty seats she saved with programs, the way she posed with a guidance counselor while a recital program sat on her parents' dashboard across town. "They sent me a text with balloons," she said, and laughed like it didn't still sting. What settled in me wasn't outrage at a single thing. It was the accumulation. The way 1,000 little tilts become a slope. Golden child, scapegoat, labels psychologists slap on patterns. In practice it looked like this. Harper's glow required an audience. Sophia's light had to be self-sustaining. Harper's almosts were celebrations. Sophia's wins were assumed. And when Sophia did stumble, when she needed help, the family machinery creaked and stared, confused by a daughter who usually solved it herself. I told her once, carefully, that what happened to her had names. She looked at me like names were a luxury. "It was just how it was," she said. Then she added, almost shy, "It's not going to be how it is." She said it like a promise to the kid in the photos, the one standing just outside the frame, waiting for someone to turn the camera. I believed her. I still do. By the time I met Sophia, she'd already taught herself how to need less. College had been the practice field for that, learning which expectations to lower, which ones to keep alive like embers under ash. She told me about freshman orientation, how she drifted toward the snacks to avoid small talk and met Naomi there, both of them hiding behind paper cups of lemonade. Naomi asked what she was studying, didn't glaze over when Sophia said engineering, and then said, "Okay, so you're the person I call when my printer eats my essay." It was a joke that turned into a pact. They built a small, sturdy life from shared calendars and secondhand furniture, late-night walks, birthdays that got noticed. Sophia learned the logistics of being her own safety net. Budget spreadsheets. Part-time lab work. Saying no to holidays when no one noticed her yes. She stopped calling home first. She stopped measuring a good day by whether a message got returned. Her wins were practical. A professor who wrote a recommendation letter unprompted, a grant that meant she didn't have to pick up extra shifts during finals. She would hold these things like smooth stones, thumb them for reassurance, then tuck them away and move forward. When we started dating, I could see the muscle memory of self-sufficiency in everything she did. She'd apologize for taking up space, for wanting the corner booth, for suggesting a movie that wasn't on my list. Once, she brought me a copy of a journal with her name in it and handed it over like contraband. "It's just a small thing," she said. I opened to her article and read the first paragraph out loud at the table until she told me to stop, cheeks bright, eyes bright too. I told her what I saw, a person who'd built an entire scaffolding because she couldn't trust anyone to hold the other end. I didn't want to knock it down. I just wanted to stand under it with her. When I said therapy might help, I watched her prepare for judgment that didn't come. "Not because you're broken," I said. "Because you've been carrying weight alone for a long time." Dr. Winters gave her language for what had happened and tools for what to do next. The first night after a session, she sat on the couch and said, "Emotional neglect, like a diagnosis and a map." She cried, not the neat movie kind, shoulders shaking, breath catching, and then she slept for 10 hours, the best sleep she'd had in months. The changes didn't arrive in trumpet blasts. They showed up quietly in the way she stopped over-explaining, in how she set her phone face down during dinner and didn't twitch when it didn't light up, in the way she let Naomi plan a birthday without insisting on contributing half the cost. She practiced asking for things and not sprinting to the register afterward to cancel the debt. There's a moment you can miss if you're not paying attention, when someone who's survived on scarcity chooses abundance without apology. For Sophia it looked like buying the good lilies for our table because she liked the smell. It looked like forwarding me an email about a promotion in typing. Before the modesty could kick in, I earned this. I wrote back what I always mean, "You did. And I'm here." I proposed in the little repertory theater where we had our first date. I'd rented the late show and cut a trailer with grainy phone clips. Our first road trip. Her laughing with whipped cream on her nose. A slow pan across the lab door with her name on it. The projector clicked, the screen dimmed, and then, there we were, soundtrack and all. When the lights came up, I was on one knee with a ring that looked like it belonged on her hand and nowhere else. She said yes with a laugh that cracked in the middle and turned into a sob, and the dozen strangers I'd bribed with free popcorn clapped like we'd won something bigger than a bet. We went home riding that bright current, opened a cheap bottle of champagne, and FaceTimed my parents, who cried in the messy, happy way of people who aren't performing for anyone. Sophia called her mother after, thumb hovering before she hit dial. Evelyn congratulated us the way you might compliment a stranger's new haircut. Pleasant, efficient, already moving on. 6 months is soon, she said. Let us know the details. Then she pivoted, almost seamlessly, to Harper's lead in a community theater show. I could feel Sophia's smile harden like cooling sugar. I told myself the reaction would warm once there were dress fittings and venues to swoon over. It didn't. The early planning felt like building a house in a wind tunnel. We sent them 3 dates for a site visit. No response. We chose Cambridge, a brick-and-lace place that felt like her. Simple elegance, nothing screaming for attention. My mom asked for swatches. Evelyn asked if there would be valet because Harper's shoes weren't practical for cobblestones. When we mailed invitations, I wrote their names in my neatest handwriting, the way you do when you still believe penmanship can persuade. Weeks went by without an RSVP. Sophia called to ask about the father-daughter dance. Daniel said he'd check his schedule, as if the aisle were a business meeting. We asked if they wanted to be involved in anything at all, tasting, flowers, even the playlist. We trust your judgment, her mother said, which in that moment felt less like faith and more like distance. Naomi was a bright counterweight. Spreadsheets, group chats, the kind of friend who knows where to find a seamstress on a Sunday. When she and Sophia tried on dresses, Naomi cried before Sophia did. I watched from a chair, a useless lump of love, as Sophia turned toward the mirror and softened, finally, into someone who allowed herself to be the center of a frame. At night, when we closed the laptop on budgets and seating charts, she'd lean into me with that particular tiredness you get from being good all day. Maybe they're just busy, she'd say, then let the sentence trail into the quiet. I didn't tell her what I was learning. There's a silence that's polite, and there's a silence that speaks. There's kept saying, without malice and without effort, we won't be coming closer. So I moved closer. I ordered the cake she wanted. I called the band. I held the line where it mattered and drew a new one where it didn't. And each small yes became an anchor against the shrug. The mailbox was a parade of yes from people who didn't owe us anything and nothing from the people who did. Friends circled the date with exclamation points. Maya called to ask about hotel blocks. From Ohio, only air. When Sophia checked the RSVP site at night, the little dashboard graph showed a tidy slice for awaiting response, and we both pretended it wasn't the exact shape of her family. I kept offering rationales like bandages. Mail gets lost. People travel. Time zones. She nodded and refreshed anyway. Her mother texted once to ask what the dress code was because Harper didn't want to look overdone, then went quiet again. Sophia sent gentle follow-ups. Just confirming you got the invitation. Would love to finalize numbers. Dad, are you still free for the dance? Her father replied 3 days later with, "Will confirm." The phrase you send to a dentist, not your daughter. Slight by slight, the message congealed. A cousin who'd always liked Sophia DM'd her a hearts and fire emoji on Harper's latest rehearsal clip, and never mentioned the wedding. Evelyn called to ask if the ceremony would be long, because Harper had a thing. Later that evening, as if the conflict were inevitable, and our vows were a traffic light to beat. Daniel forwarded a link to a discount airline. In case prices spike. He didn't add a booking confirmation. Naomi tried to ballast the mood, menus, ribbons, a cake tasting where the baker knew Sophia's name and laid out forks like silver promises. We chose lemon with raspberry and pretended it was the only flavor that mattered. Back home, I found Sophia at the table with a sticky note of names, crossing and uncrossing, trying to solve the algebra of empty chairs. Maybe we leave them unassigned, she said, so it doesn't look like, you know. I knew. When we called to ask if they'd like to join a venue walkthrough, Evelyn said she had to check with Harper's schedule, and by the time she checked, the day had passed. We offered to FaceTime them during the tasting. No answer. They did ask 3 separate times if there would be a cash bar. People can overdo it, her mother said, careful, like she was protecting us from our own party. On a Sunday, we practiced our first dance in the living room, socks sliding on the rug, the song a little tinny from my phone. She laughed when I stepped on her, then quit laughing when the music hit the line about finding home. I thought they'd surprise me, she said, soft enough that it wasn't a complaint. Like, they'd show up somewhere in the process and be excited. Her eyes were clear, not wet, the kind of clarity that comes after hope has done its rounds, and sat down. I wanted to fix it with one grand gesture. Instead, I did what I could: mailed deposits, booked shuttle buses, bought stamps. When the last RSVP window closed and their names were still gray, I took Sophia's hand off the mouse and put it in mine. If they didn't make room, we would. And if seats stayed empty, we'd learn to stop saving them. It started with Sophia going still over her phone, the way a deer goes still when the wood sharpen. We were halfway through leftovers on the couch, wedding spreadsheets minimized for one night, when Instagram flashed a photo of Harper's hand, ringside sun catching a diamond the size of a sugar cube. The caption was a squeal in typography. He asked, I said yes, tagged at a vineyard upstate. In the comments, her parents were already there with confetti and 12 exclamation points. Then a line that made the room tilt. Can't wait to celebrate this weekend. This weekend? Sophia said, but it wasn't a question. She scrolled, found the flyer graphic someone had designed. Rose gold script, the date slotted perfectly into a space that already belonged to us. Our date. She double-checked the calendar like reality sometimes needs double-checking. It didn't blink. She called her mother with the careful calm of someone defusing something that shouldn't be explosive. Mom, our wedding is that day. A pause, air moving across a long distance. Oh, Evelyn said, performing surprise like a part she hadn't rehearsed. We thought yours was the following weekend. It isn't. We sent the invitations months ago. Well, her mother tried again. Harper's was complicated to schedule. People have made arrangements. So have we, Sophia said, voice steady as a level. 60 guests. Contracts. Dad is supposed to walk me down the aisle. We'll see what we can do, Evelyn answered, and delivered the line that made my teeth ache. Could you reschedule? After they hung up, Sophia stared at the wall like the answers might reveal themselves if she held still enough. She texted Harper directly. Congratulations. I wish you told me. Is there any way to move your party? I want you at my wedding. Harper's reply arrived hours later, breezy as a palm frond. Everything's set. Maybe you could swing by after your reception? It's going to be epic. I felt something low and old rise in me. Not just anger but the ancient protectiveness that makes you widen your stance. We're not moving anything, I said uselessly, because of course we weren't. Sophia nodded, the kind of nod people mistake for agreement when it's actually endurance. She called her father next. He apologized for the confusion, said he was in a tough spot. Used phrases that belonged to office politics, not to daughters. When she asked again if they would come, he said he'd try to make part of it. That night, we lay in the dark and tried to pretend the future hadn't wobbled. Across town, Naomi sent a heart reaction to Harper's post. She's just being polite, I said, hearing how thin it sounded. The next day, Naomi was vague about fittings, mentioned an errand near a boutique tagged in Harper's story. The dots connected themselves. There's a cruelty in convenience. How easy it is to choose the party that doesn't ask you to account for your absence somewhere else. I watched Sophia move through the week like she was carrying a full glass, shoulders square, voice gentle, insisting on nothing, asking for the smallest thing. Show up. The date didn't change. Our plans didn't budge. Neither did theirs. And that was the message, clearer than any RSVP. In the family's calendar, she was still penciled in. The text came at 10:42 the night before, just when I thought we'd outrun the drama long enough to sleep. Sophia's name lit the room, then dimmed as she read. Family emergency, Naomi wrote. Might be a little late in the morning, but I'll be there before the ceremony, promise. The words were soft enough to pass a casual inspection. They hit Sophia like gravel. Naomi had been the constant. Spreadsheets, fittings, the dress zipped with gentle jokes about posture. When she said she'd stand beside Sophia, I believed her the way you believe gravity. But all week, there'd been a drift. Stories posted from the same boutique Harper tagged. A heart on Harper's engagement photo with a comment that sounded like RSVP by emoji. I kept giving it the benefit of the doubt until the benefit felt like I was paying for it out of Sophia's hide. Sophia typed back something gracious, because that's how she survives. She set her phone face down and sat very straight on the edge of the bed. It'll be fine, she said, as if the words could stack like sandbags. An hour later, Instagram slipped and told the truth. Naomi's comment under a mirror selfie of Harper in a sequin dress. You look stunning. Can't wait for tomorrow. Sat there like a confession. Sophia stared for a long time, then called. Voicemail. She texted, simple and clean. Are you going to her party instead of my wedding? The typing dots blinked, disappeared, returned, then the message. I thought I could do both. Timing won't work. I should have told you. I'm sorry. There's a part of me I don't like that wanted to throw my phone across the room, to call Naomi and ask her who taught her that convenience outranks love. Instead, I reached for Sophia and found her rigid as a board. You don't owe anyone an understanding they haven't earned, I said, and hated that I sounded like a poster in a counselor's office. She nodded without moving. Morning arrived and brought mercy with it in the shape of Allison at the door, arms full of coffee, and a plain courage that didn't need permission. She'd been Sophia's roommate junior year, a name from other stories, suddenly here and unafraid. Put me where you need me, she said, and did calls, hair, the tiny, invisible jobs that keep a day from fraying. When Sophia stepped into her dress, it was Allison's hands at the zipper, Allison's face in the mirror, steadying. I kept waiting for my anger to find somewhere useful to go. It didn't. It just settled into a low resolve. If the aisle was going to be empty on her side, then my side would swallow it whole. My father ironed his tie and asked if he should offer his arm. I nodded so hard my neck hurt. Sophia didn't cry. That almost broke me more than if she had. She breathed, squared her shoulders, and walked into her day without a single blood relative or the friend who'd promised to be there. And still, somehow, she looked like a person choosing love on purpose. I decided my whole job was to match that choice. My father knocked once and hovered in the doorway, tuxedo a little too sharp for his usual posture. I don't want to intrude, he said, eyes flicking from Sophia's dress to her bare, empty hands. But if you'd like someone to walk with you, I'd be honored. No speech, no heroics, just a bridge laid down where there was a gap. Sophia's mouth trembled, then she nodded. Thank you, Robert. He swallowed like the word meant more to him than he'd expected. The coordinator lined us up. I stood at the front with my pulse in my throat and tried not to stare at the chairs on her side, ribbons waiting like they'd been tied for ghosts. The room had that pre-ceremony hush, flowers breathing quietly, the quartet tuning themselves into something soft. When the doors opened, my father and Sophia appeared, her arm in his, the light taking its time with her. The empty row didn't shrink. It didn't need to. She made a choice and walked right through the space where someone else should have been. They reached me, and my father placed her hand in mine, like it was something sacred he'd been keeping safe. She's yours, he whispered, and for once the line wasn't about possession, it was about responsibility. I squeezed her fingers and felt the steadiness underneath the nerves. She looked up and managed that smile that always starts in her eyes. I thought, we are enough. The ceremony itself felt like holding our breath and learning we could breathe at the same time. Our friend officiated and didn't pretend this was a fairy tale. She talked about showing up when it's inconvenient, about love as a decision you remake in smaller rooms than this. I watched Sophia listen, chin lifted, and saw a lifetime of recalibration settling into a new setting. We read our vows. I went first, and my voice almost failed on the part where I promised to celebrate her wins louder than anyone else, to be the person who notices. She laughed through tears at a line about my terrible sense of direction, and the room laughed with her, grateful for relief. When she read hers, I felt the air change, plain words, nothing ornate, but each one chosen like a tool that fits your hand. She promised we would build a home where no one had to ask twice to be believed. The front row stayed empty, and somehow felt less powerful. Rings, a kiss, applause that didn't try to be bigger than the moment. As we turned down the aisle, my mother reached for Sophia's free hand and squeezed it like she'd been waiting her whole life to pass a current. Outside, under a thin slice of sky, we took the first breath that was ours. The photographer fussed, the quartet packed up, the staff whispered logistics. We stood still a beat longer. Inside the hall, 2 place cards with our parents' names stayed where we'd put them. We didn't move them. The room filled anyway. Friends, my family, Allison in the front like she'd been there all along. When we danced our first dance, my father came back for the second and held Sophia like a promise made good. The day was tender and imperfect. It was ours. The knife slid through buttercream like it had been waiting for us, and the room did its job, cheered, craned, recorded. I handed Sophia the first bite, and she smiled for the camera, sugar on her lip, wedding good and brave. That's when her phone buzzed against my wrist. Once, then again, then a staccato rush that didn't belong to a party. She glanced down. The color left her face in a clean tide. 36. Her mother. Her father. Harper. All stacked like warnings. "Whatever it is, it can wait," I said, angling my body so the photographer caught my shoulder, not her eyes. She nodded, except her hands were already moving, the old reflex of the girl who handled emergencies alone. The band hit a swell. People shouted for a kiss. We kissed. The phone kept vibrating like a trapped thing. 2 minutes, she whispered. We slipped through a side door into the garden, the summer air cooler than the room we'd left. The lights from the hall bled over the hedges, our names looping in script on the wall like proof. She called her mother. 1 ring. 2. Then Evelyn answered, already crying, the kind of crying that wants absolution first. "Sophia, oh thank God, listen. We were wrong. It's Harper. Patrick called off the engagement at the party. He said he found out. She told him what she did." "What did she do?" Sophia said, not a question so much as an instruction. "She lied about you." Evelyn rushed. She faked texts. She showed us messages where you said you didn't want us there, that you'd changed the date, that Jason's family was your real family. She stole your invitation off the porch. She deleted your voicemails from our phones when we weren't looking. I felt the world tilt like a set being moved between scenes. Sophia went very still, the way you do to keep the pieces from scattering. "I called," she said quietly. "I called and called." Her father's voice cut in, speakerphone thin, ashamed. "We believed her. We shouldn't have. We thought we deserved it. We wanted to respect your wishes." He swallowed, and I could hear the old cowardice rusting. "We are so sorry." The hedge smelled like rosemary. Inside, someone laughed, a clean bell of sound, and for a second the two realities overlapped, the joy we'd made and the wreckage her sister had carefully staged. They arrived at 11:15 looking smaller than the people in their family photos, Evelyn with her makeup blurred, Daniel clutching his phone like a permission slip. The lobby hum was too public for what needed saying, so I asked the clerk for the empty meeting room off the hall. Fluorescents, a long table, chairs on wheels that squeaked if you breathed wrong. It felt right, a place for paperwork and consequences. No one sat. Sophia stood at the end of the table, fingers flat on the laminate, and waited them out. Her mother moved first, arms lifting for a hug that stalled when Sophia didn't step forward. The pause said everything. "I'm not going to make this easy," Sophia said. The steadiness in her voice surprised even me. "You missed my wedding. You believed I didn't want you there. Explain it to me like I'm someone who deserves the truth." Daniel tried first, words careful and thin. "We thought we were respecting your wishes. Harper showed us. She showed you lies." Sophia cut in, not loud, just precise. "Why was that easier to believe than me? Why was it easier to not call me directly?" Evelyn flinched, then let the performance drop. "Because we knew," she said, breaking on the middle. "Somewhere we knew we'd failed you. That we've failed you for years. It made a terrible kind of sense that you'd choose distance. We were cowards." Daniel nodded, jaw tight. "We told ourselves we were keeping the peace. We were keeping Harper calm. We were choosing the path of least damage." He looked at Sophia like a student facing the teacher he'd disappointed. "We chose our comfort." Sophia absorbed it without blinking. "That's the story," she said. "Here are my terms. Therapy, yours together, and family sessions with me if I decide it's useful. Accountability, no more confusions, no more letting Harper translate me to you. You call me. You ask me. You show up when you say you will, and if you can't, you say that like adults. Boundaries, if you try to triangulate or minimize, I hang up. If you make my life smaller, you don't get access to it." Evelyn cried in a way that didn't beg this time. "Yes. Anything. We'll start tomorrow." "And Harper?" Sophia asked. We'll get her help, Daniel said. What she did wasn't a stunt. It was sick. We should have seen it. Sophia's face softened and held. I'm not responsible for her recovery, she said. I'm responsible for mine. Silence settled, honest for once. I watched my wife stand there in her after-wedding dress, hair loosening at the edges, and I felt a pride so clean it almost hurt. She wasn't extracting an apology. She was drafting a contract. Evelyn tried again, smaller. Can we see a photo? Of today? Sophia considered. Then she unlocked her phone, scrolled to the moment my father placed her hand in mine, and held the screen out without letting go. They leaned close, as if proximity might make up for absence. It didn't. But something shifted, a first inch. We'll schedule the therapy, Daniel said. Email. Not through Harper. He almost smiled at his own attempt at proof. We'll earn it. If you let us. Sophia nodded once. Start by going home tonight and not calling me until noon, she said. I'm going to sleep with my husband. We walked them back to the lobby. There were no hugs. At the elevator, Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest like she was promising herself something. When the doors closed, the quiet felt like oxygen. In the room upstairs, Sophia exhaled, long and slow, and looked at me. Was I too harsh? She asked. You were clear, I said. That's the opposite of harsh. And for the first time that day, her shoulders dropped all the way. Therapy didn't fix anything. It gave us a place to put the pieces without pretending they still fit. Thursday nights became our ritual, takeout after work, then a video square with Dr. Patterson for the three of us, sometimes four when my schedule allowed. Sophia learned to say things without cushioning them. Her parents learned to hear without sprinting to self-defense. The progress was small and unphotogenic. Daniel stopped opening every sentence with, "What?" Evelyn practiced saying, "I was wrong," and letting the period stand. When a session went sideways, we didn't call it failure. We called it data. Sophia kept seeing Dr. Winters alone. She'd come home with new language, like she'd been handed better tools. "Repair attempts," she said one night, recounting how Evelyn texted, "I'm thinking of you today, no strings attached." "Boundary ruptures," she said another, when Daniel forwarded a long message from Harper and asked Sophia to respond for him. Sophia wrote back one line, "That's between you and Harper." It felt like a small earthquake under a very old house. The meeting with Harper happened in a quiet cafe at a table that knew secrets. I sat 3 rows back with a newspaper I didn't read and a coffee that went cold. Harper arrived deflated, without the glitter she used to wear like a force field. I watched Sophia square her shoulders and offer exactly 1 inch of grace. Harper spoke with that staccato of someone unlearning a story as she tells it, jealousy, pressure, the uglier truth that she'd rather scorch the ground than stand on it next to her sister. I saw Sophia's jaw flex once, twice, and then loosen. She didn't offer absolution. She offered a boundary and a path. Get help, show up, earn trust slowly. When they stood, there was no hug. There was a nod. It was almost better. Naomi wrote a letter. Then she wrote another. Flowers appeared, then disappeared when they died, and still Sophia waited. They met for coffee on a Tuesday, and I watched her dress like she was going to court. Simple, strong, no room for theatrics. Naomi's apology didn't swing for the fences. She didn't explain. She confessed. "I should have called you," she said. "I believe the easy thing." Sophia listened, then slid her cup a 1/4 inch closer, which in her language is provisional permission. They started texting again, cautiously. They didn't talk about the wedding. That felt right. Allison, meanwhile, kept showing up without announcement or need. She dropped off soup when Sophia got the flu. She sent an article about women in STEM with a sticky note that said, "Proud of you, no performative tags." She joined us for a movie and folded laundry with the ease of someone who understands that friendship happens inside the boring parts. When I thanked her for stepping in that morning, she shrugged like I'd misidentified the hero. "You two did the hard thing," she said. "I just held some bobby pins." Month by month the air changed in our apartment. Sophia's shoulders sat lower. She laughed from the belly more often. We still had days where the past reached up and snagged us, an old voicemail, a dream where the aisle was empty again, but the snags didn't own the week. We hung new photos, not to replace the wedding ones, but to frame what came after. Dinner with my parents where Evelyn asked Sophia about her work and listened, really listened. A blurry shot of Sophia and Harper on a park bench, not smiling but sitting. A picture of Sophia and Naomi holding paper cups, sunlight leaning in like approval. Healing didn't look like a ribbon cutting. It looked like the quiet competence of two people choosing the next right thing. It looked like us, making dinner, answering honestly, and forgiving at a pace that didn't betray the wound. It looked like a life. We kept the anniversary simple on purpose. No reservations, no spectacle, just our small table by the window, and the good plates we forget we own. I cooked, which means I followed instructions, and didn't improvise, and she opened a bottle of sparkling water, and set out candles like we were practicing ceremony without a crowd. The city hummed like it always does, oblivious and reassuring. We ate slowly. We talked about ordinary things, her project's new deadline, my coworker's habit of scheduling 7 a.m. meetings and calling them quick syncs. I watched her in the way I always do when the day has peeled away from her, the shoulders down, the softer laugh, the space that opens in her face when she knows she's safe. After dessert, she slid a small white envelope across the table. "Open it," she said, and her voice did that bright straight thing it does when she's holding a lot together and offering me the cleanest edge. Inside was a photo that didn't look like a photo so much as weather, shades of cloud, a small crescent-shaped echo. It took me half a breath to read it correctly, and then the room sharpened. I looked up. She was already crying, not with worry, not this time, just the kind that leaks out when the body can't hold the light. "June," she said, "if everything goes the way it should." I stood and pulled her up with me, and we stayed like that in our tiny kitchen, candles burning because we've lit them, and because that's what candles do. The hug didn't feel like relief. It felt like a promise being ratified by two witnesses. When we sat again, she wiped her face and laughed at herself, and I kept the ultrasound on the table between us like a treaty. We talked about names we won't use, about the old furniture we'll give away, about how the lilies she loves will have to live on the balcony once noses arrive. We talked about boundaries, like we were budgeting, not because we were bracing for disaster, but because we understand what happens when you don't name things. She said she wants our child to know grandparents and an aunt, but not at the cost of their peace. "We can have Thanksgiving and also leave early," she said, smiling. "Both can be true." Her parents have been doing the work. They keep their therapy appointments without asking for gold stars. They show up and then leave when we ask them to, which is its own kind of love. Harper emails progress notes from a life that finally looks like hers. A job, a routine, a therapist who doesn't let her charm do the heavy lifting. Naomi earned her way back one coffee at a time. Allison comes over with stories and frozen lasagna. The circle is smaller than we imagined once, and stronger than I knew possible. Before bed, we took a walk around the block. The air had that early winter bite that wakes you up. I held her hand and felt the newness of what we were carrying, not as a weight but as a center. We passed windows where other lives were happening, TV flicker, someone arguing gently, a kid bouncing on a couch, and I thought about the empty aisle and the way we chose each other anyway. I thought about how love isn't loud when it's real, it's punctual. It shows up, even when no one's taking pictures. Back home, we put the ultrasound on the fridge with a magnet from that first trip we took, the motel with a sticky orange carpet and the sky that wouldn't stop. She turned off the kitchen light, and the little picture held steady in the dark, outlined by the glow. "A new beginning," she said. "Yes," I answered, no music, no audience. "One we write on purpose."